Welcome to Brave Healer Productions. It's time to experience what's possible. So, what if there's something you haven't learned yet that could change everything? Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions Publishing, where we are helping the world experience what's possible. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the authors of one of our newest books. This book is called We Lead, Building Connection, Community, and Collaboration for Women in Business. You guys, this is volume 3, an amazing series from lead author AliceAnne Loftus. So before I introduce Trish and Susan to you today, just a huge thank you to AliceAnne for your big vision and mission for the whole series of books, for this stellar group of expert co-authors that you brought around you to talk about this topic. Oh my gosh, gals, this is like that book where, can you imagine having this book in the beginning of your business and all of the tools and the stories? It's amazing. And we wouldn't be here without you, AliceAnne. So thank you for that. So you guys, I have a couple pretty cool people in my Zoom room today. Susan Mahaffey is an HR consultant and executive coach who helps small business leaders navigate tough people challenges with clarity, confidence, and heart. And Trish Brewer is here. She's a certified trauma-informed breathwork coach, Reiki master teacher, and practitioner. So welcome, gals. Trish, I'm going to start the party with you today. Tell us a little of the why behind your chapter.
Well, my chapter positions breathwork as more than a healing modality, instead of more of a strategic business tool that can help women entrepreneurs move from self-abandonment to self-trust, and allowing them to access that inner wisdom that exists within inside themselves, and making those decisions for better business decisions, knowing that they can access that from within themselves.
And breathwork is a really, really powerful tool for doing that. You and I joke all the time, because we were just saying before we started this that we wanted to get rid of the woo language, because we're kind of beyond that at this point. And there's some pretty profound science behind this, and the connections are pretty powerful. What do you want to tell people about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's more studies that are being done right now, and research that's being done. We already know that the science behind the breath and how powerful it is to regulate our nervous system. We know that. And now what we're seeing is, even with that nervous system regulation, we can access that clarity, right? What we find is that when we can take that pause, and when we can kind of remove these emotional blocks with this deeper type of breath work, we can get rid of like these old patterns, or at least move them out of the way, so that we can find some clarity, and we can come back to that inner knowing. And I think what we're going to find through some more research that's being done is that it kind of redirects the neural pathways. That's what's being done in new research.
So you were just
Similar.
saying the deeper kind, and I want you
Mhm.
to give people an idea. Like, there's so many different kinds of breath work. Is there a particular kind you like the most, and why do you say deeper kind of breath work?
Well, because there's two categories of breath work. There are the breath tools, and that's the things that we should be using every day, like box breath, 4-8 breath, 4-7-8 breath, alternate nostril breathing. Those are the tools that regulate our nervous system, right? The deep sigh, we know that. Those help us get through the day. We should be doing that to help build our CO2 tolerance, help us regulate that nervous system, take that pause during the day. And then we have what we were talking about earlier, different types of deeper practice, and what I call breathwork healing, or shamanic breathwork, or transformational breath work, holotropic, rebirthing, that falls into a different category of breath work. That type of breath work kind of helps clear some old patterns, clear emotional wounds, things that we have been carrying in our body as what I like to call experiences, because we're all made up of our experiences. Some people call them big T's or little T's. I just say they're experiences that we accumulate in our body. And once we can clear those, because sometimes we come back over and over to the same thing. Have you ever just like come back to a pattern where like, wow, just keep doing that same thing over and over and over again? Because we are kind of trained, right, to kind of do that same thing. It's a pathway, it's comfortable. But when we can retrain our brain and the neural pathways in our brain to do something different, then we can see things more clearly. And breath work can give us that clarity because it provides us that space to do that. The visions, um, the emotional wounds that we get to clear out of the way, the old patterns, the things that we've kind of built up over a period of time, right? Lets us um, find answers to business decisions that we might be looking at one way, that we can't see something. Um, we can only see one way, but then later, after breath work, a clearing might come up. We might see something differently because we've given ourselves space. Does
Yeah,
that
I love
answer?
listening to you describe the difference. Actually, and I don't think anyone has ever separated tools from practices before. So I'm really
Mm.
glad you did that to help people understand, because there's so many different ways that get taught with this. Um, and yeah, I will raise my hand as one of the people who have had an experience with clarity during breath work that was other level, you guys, like um, surrendering to the practice and the process and allowing myself to go a little bit deeper, whole downloads of business ideas, clarity on decision. I mean, like things that you wouldn't even realize. Um, Trish, thank you for saying yes to this project and for bringing this aspect of things to us women in business. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Susan, let's hear a little bit of your why. What's going on behind your chapter?
Wow, there's a lot there. Maybe I'll work backwards and say, Laura, that when I finished writing my chapter, I felt kind of like Trish just explained, right? This clearing and this clarity around all that I've been trying to do with the launch of my own business and being really true to why did I get into the people space to begin with? And when I started People Rise nearly 4 years ago, a lot of people said to me, you really need to tell people your origin story. Like, who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you about? And why do you feel the way you do about what things? Like, what's your point of view, right? We all have one. And I wrote a blog for Father's Day 2 years ago about my dad. And so many people just wrote to me and said, wow, that was incredible. I understand you better now. And so this chapter was another way for me to not only describe the moment when, I realized what kind of leader I wanted to be following in my dad's footsteps overall, even though I do different type of work. I recognized that I have a huge heart for people. People are my business. And then I talked about how my journey led me to becoming an entrepreneur and how this was always inside of me. And I said, no, I'm not, I was too afraid and that I needed to, and then I realized I didn't need to be afraid anymore. And so going out on your own takes a lot of courage. And when people say that to me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, Susan, what courage it must take." They aren't kidding, because it does take a lot, and it's been a hard journey, personally and professionally. But this chapter really allowed me to, in 4 pages, put it all out there and say, here's who I am. This is how I got to where I am, and here's what I'm looking forward to doing and making an impact for other people.
So, that fear of going out on your own, of becoming an entrepreneur, there's fear and freedom is the carrot dangling in front of us, right? There's
Yes.
a lot there. But it's worth it, right? What else do you want to tell people about that?
I think that a lot of times I was someone who started my career very early because I worked full time throughout college, so undergrad and grad school. And I realized like I'm having like a second career of sorts. Like now I'm really feeling like um this just like 2.0, if you will. And I think that now, I was saying this the other day to someone, that nowadays starting your own business is, I think, more accessible than it ever has been. And so many people have realized, like, I can go off and I can try it. I can do it. I can start with little resource and see if I can try it out. And a lot of people are doing fractional work. We call them side hustles as well. And so I think my encouragement to people is, don't be afraid, tinker, pilot, try it, and you'll find your way. Even if what you start doing isn't where you end up what you're doing, there's just such a it's the journey in between. It's what you learn about yourself and everything else that's really the magic. And I think that's what you have in store.
So, Susan, I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you with this next question. What does it mean to you to be an authentic leader?
I think being an authentic leader, Laura, is about living your truth. So I remember, especially when you work in HR, when you work for other people, big businesses, as I have been in as well, there's all this talk about being an authentic leader, but part of it is you have to find a way in those situations to not only be who you are and explain your thoughts and your views and kind of, I don't want to call it tote the company line, but it can get very difficult because there might be things that you're asked to do that are just part of your work that you may or may not agree with. And that might look like, for me, it was things like um, different diversity and inclusion things where we'd make promises and then we wouldn't follow through. Or it would be things like, oh, we're gonna start this initiative and we're gonna keep going. And I was like, there's no way. And so for me, authenticity is about not just showing up who you are as you are. It's really about just following through on what you say you're going to do. And then I've been talking a lot about Brene Brown's marble jar recently, and I feel like it's every time that people see you show up as the person you say, like, how people are like, oh, I'm that kind of person who does this and this. I don't want you to tell me, I want you to show me. And so I think every time you show someone, whether it's a difficult decision, the way that you behave under stress, the way you behave when your own beliefs or values are put into question, right? People are either giving you a marble or taking the marble out of your jar. And so I think being an authentic leader is just staying true to who you say you are in every situation, 24/7, 365.
The marble jar. I love that. Thank you for that. Uh, Trish, what do you want to add to this? Like when you think about being an authentic leader, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think Susan had a lot of great points, and I agree with that. I also would add, like, being authentic would be, for me, it meant showing up really with all of my gifts, even if that made some people uncomfortable,
Mm,
even when it made me uncomfortable, and it took me a long time to realize that sometimes I even questioned what was coming up for me. And and sometimes I still question it. I had this conversation with my mom just last week when something came up, and I was like, I have to ask my mom this question. And and she's like, really? And when we did, it was uncomfortable for her too, but it was something that was that kept coming up and kept coming up, and it was ancestral, and I needed to ask some hard questions. So when those, for me, they're very intuitive gifts, but every time I bring everything to the table with my clients, that's when my clients are like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that's where the deep work, even deeper work happens. And my clients are like, oh my gosh, that, yes, yes, and yes. And, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm so glad I shared that, and I always ask permission before I share, but sometimes I get these hits and I don't understand what they are, what they mean. They don't mean anything they mean something to the client, right? And I just have to trust. But that to me is like the authentic person coming through, the authentic gifts. So showing up really truly with everything that you have.
I like listening to you gals talk about this topic. It's a juicy one. I wanted to give you both just some gratitude. I'm going to give everyone a little peek of this at this cover while I give you the gratitude. But, thanks to both of you for putting your real vulnerable stories in this book. And then you're stepping up with your master teaching so our readers can have a practical experience with those things. And you both did that brilliantly. Quick special shout out to Jennifer Osterhaus for the front cover design for We Lead. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. But I keep coming back to these gifts of your strategies and tools and kinds of practices you're putting in the book. And I want to give both of you a chance to talk about yours specifically a little bit more. Trish, I'm going to stick with you for this question. What's the most important thing you want people to know about your breath, reconnecting with that inner wisdom that you already have? This is right from your chapter title.
So in the practice, are we talking about the practice?
Yeah. What's that most important thing about that you want people to know?
So I think the most important thing to know is if you're starting out, and you're like, I don't know anywhere where to start with my breath, that the first thing that we want to start with is at least become familiar with your breath, and start with a daily practice, because what we're doing is really not about how much oxygen we're getting in. Okay. I know that might be a most unpopular opinion, and people are like, what is she talking about? We get plenty of oxygen. We breathe. We get plenty of oxygen. What we're doing is manipulating our CO2. We're building our CO2 tolerance, especially if you want to eventually do the deeper breath, the healing practice, the healing breath practice. You want to build up your CO2 tolerance. So in the book, in We Lead Volume 3, there is a 30-day breath practice. And when I start with people and they're coming for breath coaching, what we do is we start with this 30-day practice of building up your CO2 tolerance. And that is what athletes are doing. They are building up their CO2 tolerance, right? And you really only need a few minutes a day, 3 times a day to really do that. You need a morning practice, an afternoon practice, and an evening practice. One to help you get yourself going in the morning, one to kind of balance the breath in the middle of the day, and one to help you rest in the evenings. And they're very simple. It's less than 5 minutes each practice. Yeah. And
Love
just
it.
know that you have that. I mean, I can guide you, but really you have to do the work because I can't breathe for you.
Yes, Trish, thank you. Thank you for all of that wisdom and especially that practice. You guys, a breathwork practice could change your business. And I could have said life, which it will, but it could change your business also, right? This is in a business book and it's in there on purpose. And I love that Trish brought her breathwork wisdom and practice in this book for us. All right, Susan, tell us, what's the most important thing you want us to know about that authentic, people-centered business?
Yeah, it goes really to the question you asked me before, Laura, right? About being an authentic leader. And what I really do is talk about, again, in a short version, going from the moment where I found myself, surrounded by a bunch of people at my dad's funeral, and realize what kind of leader I want to be because of all the people who showed up for him, and realizing his impact. And that goes back to legacy. It goes back to so much, which also brings me to a later project, but that I'm working on myself. But that goes also to my practice, where I say, someone is always watching you, your family, your friends, my son, he's watching me. And how you handle success, how you handle the hard stuff, the challenges, that's always going to show up. And the part about being a people-centered business is, I believe, Laura, that businesses are built from the inside out, right? Who you are as your business and is your brand, right? People are buying you. And we all have a way that we conduct ourselves, the way that we set our businesses up, the way that we want to make an impact. And so that's also how I led to my practice, which talks about defining your leadership signature, that we already have. We all have one. We have a way in which we already lead. We already have a way in which we define how people can count on us, how people use us. And so I think in order to name what that is, it brings a lot of clarity. And where I think there's a nice synergy also between Trisha's work and my own is there's a lot of mindfulness that is required, I think, because when you're dealing with people, there's an awareness and a need to understand the emotional and the connection between heart and mind, right? Because I talk about having a heart for people, and we go through a lot of stuff. The world right now is brutal. And so we have to remember that people are bringing everything with them all the time. And so I just think having a really intentional practice around understanding your leadership signature, and when there are moments that will make you question yourself, there'll be moments where you question what you're doing or how you're doing it. And then sometimes it's just about getting grounded again. And so I think if you know what that signature is and how you might also want to build on that to be even better, and I believe that can come through others, including those who work with you and for you, that's where the magic happens. Is where it all comes together. So that's how I see people-centered businesses.
Thank you. I love it. All right, gals. Oh my gosh. Um, People who are listening today, I know we just started these amazing conversations, and I want to thank both Susan Mahaffey and Trish Brewer. Thank you both for being here, for what you do in the world, for sharing with everyone today. And I want you guys to know that this is way more than a book that we are putting out. This is a generous community of amazing women. So come on down into the show notes. I've got them hooked up with their links, and go explore what they are up to. If these topics are turning you on, you've got a question, you need support, they're there for you to answer those questions and carry on the conversation. We also hope that you go over to Amazon and grab your copy of this amazing book. The link is down below for that as well. And lastly, today, everyone, remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it's time to be brave. See you next time, everyone.